Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Please make it up here. I see a few people still out there. We have some VIP seats out here next to Jason. All right. Well, welcome. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jimmy Mwangi, and I'm part of responsible for business development here at the 5G Hub. So we've got a great session for you today. Welcome to our speaker series on education. We've got a great panel and a discussion for you today. But before we get going, for those of you that have been here before, we kicked off this thing called trivia, which has been fun, right? So how this works is I'll go through a series of questions here. If you know the answer, please raise your hand, and hopefully you get a prize. You get it right, and you get a prize. So with that, I'm going to kick us off here. Okay, let's go to the first one. All right, so how much capital is educational technology projected to attract globally by 2025? A, 196, B, 205, C, 379, D, 404. We got to raise our hand. D is correct. All right. All right, next one. How much cost savings can be achieved through virtual learning? A, 10%, B, 15%, C, 20%, or D, 25%? First hand I saw. 20% is correct. Look at that, man. Got some smart people here, huh? No wonder we got a speaker series on education today. All right. Okay, next one. Immersive learning using VR has shown to be X times as effective as non-VR training in education. A, 106, B, 111, C, 1.41, and D, 1.83. I think I see a hand. What was that? Close. Was that a B for boy, D for? D? A, okay. Nope, it's not A. I see a hand right here. D is incorrect. Hey, there's only one left, right? All right. B it is. Right over here. All right, next one. What percentage of MIT students wish there was more of a focus on immersive learning games and simulations? A, 19%, B, 31%, C, 47%, D, 76%. Fortunately, you got to be seated right here. So I'm going to go right here. C is correct. I still got some VIP seats right here. Okay, next one. Which method of learning has the highest retention rate of knowledge? A, discussion, B, teaching others, C, demonstration, D, lecture. Close. B, you got to teach others. Come on. B it is. Still got to go old school. All right, last one. Okay. When having people practice a skill to learn, how much faster is the training? A, 1.6 times faster, B, 2 times faster, C, 3.1, D, 4 times faster. Yep, right there. Yep, you. 3.1 is close. Yep, that's correct. 4 times faster. Good job. All right, hopefully that was some fun and we learned something today. All right, so a couple call outs. So shout out again, if you haven't had a chance, spread out throughout the space here. We've got a few demos. Big shout out to our partners here, L&T Technology Services, CARE AR. We've got some students from University of Washington and Meta, so thank you. And then last but not least, just a plug, again, we've got a wonderful space here. The point of this space is really to foster innovation. So whether you're a big company, a mid-size, a startup, you've got an idea, feel free to reach out to us. We've got a booth right here with my colleague Sean. Feel free to reach out to us, and we're more than happy to collaborate and have those discussions with you. So with that, the real show is going to begin. So let's go ahead and kick that off.
Welcome to our August Speaker Series session here at the 5G Hub on education. A perfect topic as we near the end of summer break. Oh, so sad. Education impacts our lives and our economy, starting in our early years, childhood years with grade school, through our university years as young adults, and continues throughout our career journey with on-the-job training and development. I don't know about you, but I never anticipated how much training I would still have at this point in my career. I feel like I'm constantly taking online courses and researching new concepts. Education is a powerful tool. It is a gift. It is an investment where the returns are far too significant to measure. But it all starts with access. Access to the teachers, the lessons, and the training resources. High-speed connectivity, especially mobile, is foundational for education to be available to all and bridge the digital divide. When 1.2 billion children were displaced from the classroom due to the pandemic, they relied on remote access and connectivity from their homes, along with the necessary tools for virtual classrooms to engage with teachers and their classmates. Unfortunately, millions of students in the US still do not have reliable internet access. What's exciting, though, is this is one initiative T-Mobile is committed to making an impact. Project 10 Million is T-Mobile's $10.7 billion initiative to offer connectivity for up to 10 million eligible student households that lack equal access to the internet. And I'm proud to share that we have already connected more than 5.3 million students, which is awesome. And with this access to a nationwide 5G network, education can benefit from some of the latest in technologies, with high-quality video streaming, immersive AR/VR, AI, remote collaboration tools, and so much more. Education is evolving, well beyond traditional in-classroom experiences. Teachers are using technology to get real-time feedback to adjust to student needs, including personalizing lessons and customizing coursework. A recent report showed that 83% more progress was seen in testing with students who use a tool which uses AI to provide personalized math homework support. Then let's not forget about immersive learning with AR/VR, enabling virtual field trips around the world. So cool, all elevating the learning experience. And when considering the changing job market with new technology and automation, it's crucial for employers to use active learning to retrain employees to perform new jobs. Robust and ubiquitous connectivity also provides workers new opportunities for training and support remotely that they've never had before. And as you learned in our trivia or pop quiz today, EdTech is projected to attract approximately $404 billion of capital globally by 2025. Today, we are going to discuss how connectivity and the latest in technology can create new opportunities to advance the world of education. So please join me in welcoming our panelists out on stage. Welcome. Welcome. All right, good afternoon. Thanks for joining. Okay, you guys are again in for another treat. We have some fantastic panelists here with us this afternoon to talk all about education. And I'm going to start off with some introductions. So first, we have Arpit Mehta, head of North America's Carrier Product Management at Meta. With over 15 years of experience bringing new products to market, he is a product launch enthusiast and expert, having generated billions of dollars in revenue. Arpit is passionate about innovation, having worked on and launched several industries' first smartphones and 5G products in North America. Welcome, Arpit. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Next, we have Anurupa Ganguly, founder and CEO of Prism of Reality. Anurupa founded Prisms to scale a new world of teaching model where students learn core math and science concepts spatially, physically, and steeped in important real-world context. Targeting topics that are often memorized, Prisms transforms learning with problem-driven learning utilizing VR in core curriculum. Anurupa's life mission is to empower an equitable workforce in STEM. Thank you for joining. Also, Prisms is a graduate of T-Mobile's Accelerator program in 2021, which is very exciting. All right, next we have Mark V. Silas, Vice President for Information Systems and Technology at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. With more than 20 years of professional experience in information systems and technology, Mark has a wealth of in-depth technical knowledge. He now leads the Information Systems and Technology Department to drive the overall MIT vision for their digital foundation to support MIT's education and research mission. Thanks for joining, Mark.
Thank you.
All right. And finally, we have John Rady, Assistant Teaching Professor at the University of Washington in the Department of Electrical Engineering, along with being the Technical Program Advisor at the Global Innovation Exchange. John has several years of expertise focused on human-robot interactions and cognitive science. With John's expertise and passion for innovation, he has had a strong impact on students' education and preparing them for successful careers. Thanks for joining, John. All right. Okay, so here's the drill. I am going to start off asking our panelists some questions, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn it over here to the folks in the room. Also, to those joining us over the webcast on YouTube, please go ahead and put your questions in the comments. All right, so let's get started. So first question, now that we are finally in our post-pandemic world, what would you take away as the greatest learning when it comes to technology and education? And what is our greatest opportunity, again, coming out of this pandemic?
Yeah, you know, pandemic was a very difficult situation in general, but what it opened up is created a huge opportunity and in kind of a pilot project where everyone was made to stay at home, right? Working remote learning and several such experiments. Now, we at Meta have been investing billions of dollars for a long time for the doomsday, right? And what we saw with the uptake in terms of remote learning during this pandemic and post-pandemic has been just amazing. We have partnered with several companies in the industry, with universities, created $150 million grant to help promote the remote learning education. And in general, we believe like we're just scratching the surface. There's a lot to happen in the space. The tools that we are building at Meta, in Reality Labs, our mission is essentially to build the tools that can help build connection anytime, anywhere. And essentially, if you look at everything that we have launched so far and things we are promoting in future, it all gels together in terms of where the technology is going to head and how it's going to help reduce the divide in terms of equity in education. A student sitting somewhere in remote areas in probably South Dakota can today or in future have experiences learning from someone at MIT or Stanford with the professor at the same time that someone sitting in that room through VR immersive experiences. And that, I think, is going to be game-changing.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anurupa?
Yeah, I think that the pandemic greatly sensitized parents. They had a frontline view of what the education system is. And it sensitized to the fact that existing tools are not aligned to how we learn. Existing tools digitized methods of the past. So we made lectures, we made them online. We had lectures, make them videos. We had worksheets, we put them on screens. So we were digitizing a system that worked for about 10 to 12% of the population. And I think now, with the next wave of computing, spatial computing, AR, VR, MR, we now have the opportunity to scale our ideals. We know that we learn through experience, we learn through our bodies, we learn through rich storytelling. And for the first time, we focus on STEM education. Kids are going, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that I was doing math. I was in a situation, whether it's renewables or energy or infrastructure, they're in the real world economy outside the classroom where problems are generated, and then learning core math, science, we'll be moving to the humanities and other subject matter soon, learning through problems. So problem-based learning is something that we've been trying to scale for a very long time, but was not possible with the previous generations of tech. And I think there's a massive opportunity to now, we call it the EdTech Wave 3, where best practice pedagogy meets technology. And so what people are looking for is learning design and methodology versus let's just put iPads, laptops, computer, and infrastructure into schooling, because that didn't work.
Yeah, excellent, thank you. Mark?
I think for us, one of the great things was all the investments I think that have been made over the last 10, 20 years in building out this rich infrastructure driven by people like Meta and others. It really created a foundational environment that could meet the needs of the pandemic, right? So we had an infrastructure that was up to the task. We were able to live, work, teach, all sorts of things, maybe make friends and do other kinds of camaraderie remotely. And it worked, right? And I think it was one of the largest global scale experiments hopefully we'll ever see in our lifetime. I don't think I have another pandemic in me, but it really showed the impact of this infrastructure at scale. For us at MIT, it was really an eye-opener, right? It really showed the power of these investments, and it also showed, hey, these are areas we should make in further investments in the future to really think about how do we capitalize on these, how do we really capture the experience of what we're doing here, what we're teaching, how we're doing it. But much like my colleagues have mentioned, that's going to be a reinvention, right? That's not just taking something you're doing today, recording it on a camera and putting it online. That's not enough, right? That doesn't capture the richness of what we're doing. So as much as the tech was up to the needs of the pandemic, in order to be a true parity replacement for what we do, we have a long way to go. And it's going to take new technologies, new infrastructures, all sorts of things. But I think everybody around us now recognizes the need for digital, the opportunity for digital, and the real way this is going to change our world. So I think it's opened a whole new world of opportunities and investments. And I think that's the challenge and the rallying call as we kind of go forward. So it's very exciting.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, it's a great question. So at the graduate level, our curriculum is very much project-based. And so for our students, like when the pandemic started, a number of our students went back to China, went to India, went to parts of Europe. And yet we needed to still teach our project courses all in real time and in a synchronous manner. And so including robotics, where you've got a physical robot there at GIX, and yet students in China, for example, needed to teleoperate or remote control that robot with significant time delay or latency. And so both students learned new ways to collaborate together to still meet the learning objectives of the courses and find new ways to accommodate those time differences as well as the technical challenges and come together and still deliver working prototypes and final project proof of concepts for the courses. So I think it really showed the resiliency and finding new ways of using the technology like Zoom and these other video conferencing tools to more effectively work together and bond as teams.
Excellent, thank you. So I agree. I think I was also surprised too in just the adoption. I guess we didn't have a choice. But just having children in grade school, middle school as well, I was just blown away how quickly they adopted the tools and they were able to be successful in virtual classrooms. But I think you brought up some good points where we saw the adoption, but now we really need to refine it. And it's not just putting an iPad in their hands. How do we really teach them and do those tools? So, Anurupa, you started off on that a little bit. Maybe go a little bit deeper, specifically on maybe what you're doing with Prisms and what you're seeing in working with the teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we keep kind of saying, like, what's going to win is best practice pedagogy. So when I go in and we are scaling virtual reality across K-12 schools right now. We started with just 10 districts a year ago. We're across 196 in 36 states, so it's proliferating so quickly. And it's coming from the fact that they look at this and they say, I've always wanted to teach that way. I always wanted to put kids in great problems and have them move around. You look at students with disabilities and you look at their IEPs and you'll see crazy things like the student needs to visualize. Is it him and Einstein, him and everyone else, right? So things that used to be a handicap because of lack of modalities, now with those modalities, you're really able to kind of see that aspirational teaching method. And what is that doing? It's making teachers want to stay in the field. The number of teachers who have told me, Anurupa, we're staying in the field of teaching this year because you've elevated the professionalism of teaching, what it means to teach. You're not flipping pages in a textbook. Everything is now discourse-driven because these rich worlds, these virtual worlds for learning, there's so much interactivity and tactile learning. The kids are now driving their own perseverance. They're kind of pushing through difficulty. So the teacher gets to really focus on our most vulnerable kids and be that strategic discussion and facilitator. And so it's really kind of making her job so much easier, which is creating huge ROI. We just finished our first randomized control trial that showed Algebra 1 is Bob Moses called it the civil rights issue of our time. About 70% of kids in the US are not proficient in algebra. It's one of the main predictors of future life wages and access to much of our economy. And so that there's a huge push by the US government and state governments to push proficiency on algebra. And our RCT showed an 11% increase immediately on test scores, which is pretty rare for this subject area. So what it's doing is creating a lot of hope and idealism that for the first time, tech is not going to be for the sake of tech. And it's actually, it has the ability to move learning outcomes, which has been the unicorn in education so far.
That's great, and it's great to hear that feedback from the teachers as well. That's excellent. Arpit, you want to maybe share a little bit about Meta and what you guys are doing to kind of evolve this?
Yeah, I mean, in general, as you can see, Meta has been the pioneer when it comes to getting out this technology and the overall VR platform in general. What we are focusing is not just what's out today, but the roadmap in terms of years down the lane. How can we make these products more scalable? How can we bring the form factors that are more accessible, easy to use? Days where at some point, as you might have seen Mark in the last Connect event last year, he have shown, the form factors we work on, the future of VR is slowly going to come to a point where there will be simple glasses where you'll be able to have a display projecting on your glasses, right? So we are investing a ton of money in those fronts and seeing how some of these can be helpful to the education in future. And it's exciting to see some of the applications that the companies like Prisms and a lot of other partners that are building around it. And this gives us more incentive to kind of go and keep doing the same thing and keep improvising based on the feedback we are hearing. So you will see, I think we already announced we have a product that's launching in October this year that's going to bring the best of technology and the form factor. And I do expect this to continue to improvise and be able to be cost-effective as well to make it more scalable for the broader ecosystem.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Mark, I want to go back to your comment on infrastructure.
Sure.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? You can obviously talk about connectivity.
Yeah. Yeah.
But talk broader about the infrastructure and what's required.
Yeah, I mean, gosh. It's one of those things like utility. When it works, you don't think about it, but when it doesn't, everybody knows your name. You don't want to be on that list, right? I think for us, the infrastructure capabilities are going to be needed down the road to support these new modalities, these new capabilities. How do you really take the experience of being somewhere and bring that to somebody real time? The infrastructure for that doesn't really fully exist yet, right? We're going to kind of build the tracks if the train is moving, or we're going to change the tires as the bike is moving. But MIT is doing some, I think, work now to try to think about what that infrastructure of the future looks like, really thinking where does 5G fit in there, working with early 5G innovators to try and start to bring those capabilities out and think about how they're going to work in our environment. How do we manage them? How do we support them? What do they look like? And it's early days, right? I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things about these things is these are big shifts, right? They take a long time to turn. If you want to be in a good position 5 years from now or 10 years from now, you got to start today. And so I think we're trying to take every opportunity we can, learning kind of the types of needs we're seeing, the types of capabilities we're seeing. But I think, it's also daunting that the things that we need don't exist yet in some cases. And we're going to have to put a lot of investment and resources to make that happen. But I think we're doing that. And I'm optimistic for the future. But I think the types of networks people are going to need, 3, 4, 5 years from now, it's not the networks we have right now. And whether it's T-Mobile or private 5G or others, it's going to be something completely different than what we've seen. And that's where I think we're going to spend a lot of investment in the years ahead.
Excellent, thank you. So John, maybe, I feel like you kind of have one foot in the student, but also one foot in kind of the on-the-job training, because you work closely with graduate students at GIX who do projects. Obviously, they're in a classroom environment, but they're working with companies like T-Mobile on real solutions, real products. How does GIX approach ed tech in preparing students and also, I guess, curating your program?
Yes. So at GIX, our curriculum is designed to be applied, innovative technology projects. And so our students then need to investigate the business aspects of a project. They conduct primary and secondary research, going out, interviewing users of potential sectors, and then from that, identifying what are the most applicable technologies to address the problems that they've identified. And so with our students, we really, with the projects, for example, with T-Mobile, we've worked in spaces such as wildfires and trying to identify how, when there's a crew out on the fire lines, there's a lot of chaos. It's a very rapidly changing environment. How do you assess the health and wellness of those firefighters out there in the field in real time and enable the crew manager to be able to detect, hey, this firefighter their physiological changes are kind of indicating potentially heat stroke. We need to bring them back in and swap them out with another firefighter. So it's, designing a smart helmet for wildland firefighters, which with 5G connectivity to enable this kind of solution to the problem.
Excellent, thank you. All right, I have another question for our panelists, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience so you guys get your questions ready. So my question, I guess maybe starting with you, Mark, where you ended, so what obstacles do we face? What are the challenges? And you talked a little bit about the infrastructure and the network is still a couple years out. Can you maybe articulate a little bit more about what are those requirements? What can we do to help?
Sure. I think of one of my colleagues, Marco Gomes, who works with me on all these infrastructure aspects, and we always talk about, we need more spectrum, we need more capacity, and there just isn't enough. And I think that's one of the true challenges we have is, the demands we're kind of looking at long term in terms of spectrum utilization, and in order to meet these latencies and these other capabilities, it's daunting, right? So, we'll take a large-scale lecture hall at MIT, supporting, say, 300-400 students, in order to get what I'll say is reliable performance of, say, wireless networking using traditional technology, that takes 40 or 50 access points. Mm-hmm. That's one access point serving 5 people. Think about that. And we're not talking about low latency, any of this next generation 5G capabilities. We're talking about just consistent Wi-Fi performance so you can keep a video session up, right? And that's not going to be enough to do AR or VR. When you start to think about that, there's all sorts of efficiencies needed in how you manage your actual wireless connectivity that go well beyond what you can do with traditional wireless networking. And it really, believe it or not, pushes you more towards the capabilities of cellular networks because they're kind of built for the ground up for managing airspace and spectrum efficiently, right? So you kind of have this interesting situation where I think enterprises have a demand that's going to increasingly drive them towards using similar sets of technologies that carriers have been, dealing with for many years. And that's going to be different than, things we've dealt with in the past. That's a technology that I think's been traditionally closed off to private enterprises, right? It's been mostly a regulated airspace. It's, regulated technologies. I think, with CBRS, one of the great things we've seen is that's opened it up a little bit to private enterprises, and it's opened up, I think, most importantly, innovation, right? the fact that people can actually play with these technologies. And this is, like, for example, a wonderful innovation center, but in order to, for folks, the average person to play with these technologies, you need a specialized space to do that. But this actually takes those technologies and democratizes them to a degree and allows people to actually work with them. And I think I'm optimistic it'll spur all sorts of exciting innovation we'll see and make those much more compelling technologies for enterprises to kind of look at. So I think that's really exciting, working with folks at like Highway 9 Networks to kind of explore what does this look like, right? Which I think is great. And then, you have the cellular carriers who always manage kind of the macro scale, networks. And, for them, they have a different challenge. They have a scale and all sorts of other things they need to deal with. So I think over time, you almost want to see more of a blending of the two. And I don't know what that, that marriage, arranged marriage or otherwise, is necessarily going to look like. But I think in order to really deliver on the promise of what we need to meet the demands of the future, it's going to require a very different kind of networking paradigm than we've seen with private enterprises and carriers, and a little bit more of a collaboration than what we've done in the past.
Excellent. Well, I think you articulated the challenge or opportunity very well. And obviously that's something that I'm excited about. I think we're excited about at T-Mobile is the opportunity to leverage 5G and the capabilities that it brings to do exactly those things and those innovations. So, Anurupa, you talked a little bit earlier when we were having lunch, I believe, about similar challenges too with Wi-Fi that you face with your product.
Yeah, and it's funny, I was actually talking to Arvind before this, and I said, well, we can't do anything until we solve the latency issue. And he goes, Anurupa, like, don't you know? So I think going back to what you're talking about, like having much better partnership opportunities so that we as developers of this ecosystem are constantly like updating our product and our features and our vision for what's possible. Right now, we are so focused on single player activities because collaboration is so dependent on that reliability and that responsiveness of the person with whom you're working. And so we can barely get our updates run. Our executable is like, 10 gigs, and it takes our tech teams at schools, I don't even know, like weeks to do the update, to the point where we're flying team members out to do wired updates. Like that's where we are right now, right? And so there's a fear from our school systems. The first thing they ask is, what are the network requirements? And it's going to preclude them from wanting to make real investments in AR and VR if they don't, in parallel, make the overhauls to the network infrastructure required to run these high bandwidth and meaningful applications.
Yeah. Arpit, is there anything, I guess, from an opportunities or challenge perspective, you talked about scalability. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I think, T-Mo has done a great job with all the spectrum management, right? Getting the hold of all the right spectrum at the low band. I strongly believe, I think last few years in the industry, they were spent trying to figure out how to make sure there is a connectivity at the last mile, right? There was a coverage, there was a capacity, and that's all been taken care of for the last few years. Now is the real time that companies like T-Mo can really capitalize on your ability to have the connectivity everywhere with 5G SA, for example. Because if we have to take some of our applications, use cases, to the broader infrastructure within the university campuses, within the hospital infrastructure, I agree with Mark. I mean, you can't be having hundreds and hundreds of APs on Wi-Fi. I have been involved in some of the Wi-Fi spectrum discussions, for example, and with 6E, they're trying to bring in the whole 1200 megahertz to show how they can really be more efficient, but that's going to take time, and replacing the current infrastructure on the EP side, it's going to be another cost barrier. So this is where I think with the low latency applications that we are building and the industry is building for the immersive learning and AR/VR platform, there can be a big penetration using your low latency 5G SA infrastructure, including some of the local MEC that you can build around these infrastructures, and in added with all the AI models that companies like Meta are open sourcing today, it can create wonders in the coming future.
Excellent, excellent. John, any thoughts on this one as well, some of the challenges?
Well, I think the latency, of course, is the biggest one.
Yeah.
So for robotics in particular, if you have a robot working on, maybe it's in a data center or maybe it's at an assisted living facility, if it's trying to navigate its way through a hallway, you can't have it just sort of getting stuck or not being able to generate a map of its terrain, or most importantly, identify that, oh, there's a person walking right in front of me, and to be able to stop and avoid that person. So I think that's where students are trying to tackle some of these problems and identify ways to sort of mitigate path planning techniques. And of course, with latency, if it can go down with 5G, then it helps reduce the issue.
All right, well, we'll have to test it out here.
Yes.
All right, any questions from the room? I know we've got some. All right, go right ahead.
So, quick question. My name is Devin, and I attend many of these events and listen to a lot of the hardware components or philosophical approaches, but what about just considering programming languages? For instance, Rust itself, when we talk about AR and VR, it outperforms JavaScript at a minimum 126% in browsers to 1,680%. So when we talk about latency and we talk about inefficiencies, start teaching developers more efficient programming languages and you won't have to worry about your hardware overheating. Just throwing it out there. So what are you guys doing to focus on programming specifically?
Mark, you would take that one?
Sure. I think we're always advocating to create languages that are the right tool for the problem. I think one of the biggest challenges we have is that it's hard to have, I don't know, necessarily the tool built in advance, but I think if you look at these particular use cases we're facing now, I think responsible use of our natural resources is something that's really important. I think the languages people are using today, take one of the most dominant, C or C++, was created in the 1970s, right? And it's still dominant, right? And think of how long the tail is on the evolution of that over the period of time. Now, the languages that we're creating today for these use cases, taking into consideration some of the things of 2020 or 2010, you're starting to see those things kind of come to the forefront with Rust, which is a big improvement, and JavaScript. Someone just celebrated the anniversary of JavaScript, and they showed a picture of the founding Netscape team. And there was that was 25 years ago, right? And that was when JavaScript was founded. So I think when you look at what's the predominant languages today versus how long of an incubation period they had and how long it took for the languages to represent the times they were created in, I say in the next 5-7 years, you'll see things that are much better fit for what we're doing today. I see some of them at MIT every day in terms of the cutting edge, and I think you'll see more deployment of those in the years ahead.
Thank you. Go ahead. Do you want to go ahead, Ed? Go ahead and comment.
Yeah, I was just going to probably reply in a slightly different way, like for the problem that you mentioned on overheating. I think it's also not just a programming problem. There is also a broader physics problem that we have to resolve, especially in some of the AR, VR products that we are building. So, for example, some of the displays, the wavelength, the guides that goes into these displays in the form factor that we want to build. There is very little space in terms of asset for the hardware engineers to design these products. So beyond just software development, there is a bigger problem that we have to solve. And even back when I was at Google, we used to talk about thin client, right, where you try to run some of the compute in the cloud, right? And that, again, companies like T-Mobile's infrastructure come into play because if we start throwing away more and more compute on the cloud, then automatically it will benefit the entire ecosystem because then less and less compute power is required on the devices, which in return will create better form factor, thinner devices. Absolutely. So there is a bigger play here rather than just programming problem.
Absolutely, excellent point.
Good point.
Yes, next question.
My name is Jason, and for the regular folk around here, I hear a lot of latency, I hear a lot of access points, I hear technology. Okay, great. Could you paint me a picture of what blue sky, this version of EdTech actually looks like? I hear a lot of technical stuff, but what's the benefit? From the stats that you gave earlier, Aaron, it looked like you were dealing with 11% increase in VR training. Okay, that's good, but I've also heard that education in general, just better teachers or better training and all those kinds of things. So can you paint a picture of what EdTech could actually bring us as benefits?
Ooh, good question.
Yeah. There's so much in what you said. what I'm going to respond to is, as I was a teacher, I taught algebra and physics in the Boston Public Schools. And what I was mitigated by is what our children, they don't need more information, because if that was the case, Google would have solved the problem. They need experiences. They need schema. We're in lots of Title I districts in West Palm Beach. If you've ever been there, there are railroad tracks, and all the very well-to-do people live on one side, and the people that serve them live on the other. And West Palm Beach is a mile from the beach. And in our linear functions modules, kids put their headsets on and they're in Miami. And they're at Roy's clam shop, and Roy is really worried that he's elevating his decks because of rising sea levels. And you get to actually work with the city of Miami in this environment using tactile tools to derive linear functions and then use them to solve the problem. I say this because when our kids in West Palm Beach put their headsets on, they told me, I'd never been to the beach. So what VR is doing is really democratizing access to experiences. Word problems are no longer words. Words get stuck at your prefrontal cortex. It's very high cognitive demand. So we have kids like circling words, underlining, they don't know what they mean. But if you can touch it and feel it and have emotional resonance with these experiences that then kind of inspire our kids to want to solve problems. Like I ran the college process in a lot of the districts that I led in, and I'd always ask kids, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I'm like, wait, we got to reframe that problem. What problems do you want to solve? And we're never going to get kids to truly articulate that if we haven't put them at the seat of many, many problems. So in terms of like just the last, if I were to directly answer your question, when I think about spatial computing tools, it's not just VR, it's not just AR, it's the reality dial. So thinking about what learning objectives are best met by full immersion and in world building and being in stories, which are best in mixed reality. So you have your, Apple does text interfaces so beautifully. How do you spatialize them? How do you utilize them? How do you manipulate them? How do you work with them after you've kind of really understood the real world context? What's best for web? What's best for paper pencil? So being far more methodical about the modality that you pick, the learning objective that it aligns to, and just broadening up those modalities. Does that somewhat build? Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I would just add at the more of the graduate level, our students in collaboration with UW Medicine worked on a project with AR technology to show, hey, like my hand, maybe I broke my finger, let's say years ago playing baseball or whatnot. We could 3D print for medical students a 3D physical model of my hand, and then superimpose, overlay the different AR layers of the vesicles, the skin tissue. And then I could look at it, but then also my fellow classmates can also look at the different layers together and then collaboratively learn and train on what is the best way for an orthopedic surgeon then, or as training and learning this procedure to either fix a joint or whatever the case may be. So it creates new ways of learning that's tailored to the individual.
There's one more thing I thought of, and I think it's actually a very important distinction as it pertains to AR and VR. We think a lot about like animations and visualizations. We don't think as much about embodiment in terms of what that means in the classroom. So like, for example, we just built our module on cells and organelles and the function of organelles. One way to do it is to kind of watch videos and animations of what ribosomes and lysosomes do, and the other is to be a lysosome, and to start to build physical remembrances of definitions and ideas and context, and that's been game-changing for our kids. Now they're standing, they're moving, they're doing things with their body. Einstein talked a lot about this, as he used to say his thinking was muscular, so that's just another big value proposition, is screens, boards, paper, created a very passive learning experience, so that you were kind of watching things and observing things versus doing. And I think what AR VR does allows you to become the doer of the experience or the learning.
Yeah, I would actually recommend you. We have one of the demos here in the back where you can actually see how to dissect a starfish. Basically, it's okay to see all these videos and hear about professors doing it in the class, but if you're actually within the immersive experience where you actually have your own starfish or squid and you're actually being guided to cut and understand the entire internal anatomy, and this is the example we have here, but I have seen this being optimized for cancer cells, for studies in the higher medical use cases where you can actually have difficulty trying to go inside the human body, where they paint an entire 3D view of the anatomy and go inside the body and understand where and how each organ works and be able to dissect those as a surgeon. So I would strongly recommend you try out the demo so you can see like what we are talking.
Excellent, thank you. Oh, we have another question.
Well, thank you for providing this forum. I'm Mary Alice, and I'm both a business person and a citizen volunteer. And I'm wondering what you would like to see in terms of a call to action for your business colleagues or from your citizen volunteer nonprofit world that would best help education innovation.
Love that.
Oh,
Call to
great.
Anybody want to give some call to actions?
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, I'm traveling around the U.S. right now presenting to school boards answering this exact question. And I think that right now it kind of goes back to what I said before, is we must demand technology that at the base is pedagogy, at the base is a learning design. I love the question that the gentleman asked before around like, can you please describe the value prop? And I think the call to action is for everyone to start demanding research-based design in how these modalities are modulated. So when I first started, everybody's like, okay, Dr. Rich Mayer, he's been studying the impact of VR on cognition for a long time. And one of his studies actually found that you can learn concepts in biology better using PowerPoint than a VR experience he'd built. And what did that tell the world? It told the world the medium by itself is not going to do anything. It's going to be how do you design it? How are you being very, very intentional about the series of experiences that the kid is going through? So we do need to demand an infrastructural overhaul. And so I am kind of right now begging school boards to begin to adopt VR hardware. There's going to be so much more to come. Arpita was mentioning the next generation that's releasing later this fall. We've done our port. We have to get a new generation of hardware, a new generation of network capabilities, because otherwise these sorts of applications will die. And it's not that schools do not have the money. We were talking about this earlier. They have the funds. It's a matter of political will. It's a matter of people understanding the value that it'll deliver and giving more exposure to that value.
Any other call to actions?
I would say, we have education as a business, I think, is being challenged right now. I think if you look at the cost, particularly of higher education, the price points are quickly approaching unreachable for many. And I think the fundamental economics, the fundamental business of education needs real investment. It needs real discussion. It needs real scrutiny. It needs our attention. And it doesn't get enough of that. Not enough people are asking those questions. It's kind of a business that is important to. It's a game changer, right? Your education can open every door of opportunity to our next generations, right? And at the same time, we have to care for that asset, we have to nurture it, and we have to challenge it too. Can we do it better? Can we be innovative? And I think the kinds of innovations you're hearing today can help us do that and make it more accessible, make it more economical, make it more feasible. But that's going to require all of us to challenge, I think, education itself. And so I encourage everyone to creatively, passionately, ask those hard questions, and that's going to make everybody better. And I think that's important that people aren't afraid to shy away from that.
Thanks, Mark. All right, next question.
Yeah, my name is Peter, and I was a technology director for a school district for 20 years. And I was there the day the internet came to our school district. And I can't tell you how many great ideas I've heard over the years, although I'm very excited about the Prism work you're doing, but that how much money that we've spent. Very early in my career, I participated in my very first surplus sale, and it literally made me sick to watch all this equipment that we basically had to pay somebody at the time to take away. And I just wondered at that very moment, like, did we really do the best we could with this? And really at that time, the answer was no. And one of the greatest challenges I found is these great ideas come to us, somebody above me decides we're going to do this, and then it's up to me and two other people to try to figure out how to implement it. So you're going to show up with a bunch of really cool VR devices, and it's going to be up to like two people
Yeah.
to figure out how we're going to implement this and how we're going to train people to use it. So, I mean, I think one of the challenges for you as leaders, and what I don't think people talk about, is how do you help schools implement this, and how, you know, it's the hardware part's easy, the infrastructure part's easy. It's just a matter of spending money. It's the implementation and the people who have to go out there and get this into people's hands and make it work and be assured that this is being used properly. I mean, the greatest impediment to education from teachers that I still know that work are these.
Totally.
These are the greatest impediment
Yeah.
to education.
I'm really glad that you brought that up. I didn't mention it before, but no, you have to stay. That was such an important comment. You can't go away. Okay. No, you can't go away. I'm really glad that you brought that up. I mean, I cannot say this, I cannot underscore this enough. We are leading one of the largest upskilling programs I've seen in my tenure. We're training thousands and thousands of teachers right now around how to do problem-based learning. Our sessions are not, how do you use VR in the classroom? No. How do you do problem-based learning? It just happens that this is the technology tool that's going to allow you to unleash that pedagogical method. So I could not agree with you more. We work a lot with our tech teams as well around how we like unbox with you, we connect it to Wi-Fi with you, we manage the updates with you. So we are hand-holding school systems right now to walk into this next future, but not do it the way we did it last time, where we put smart boards and Promethean boards. Like I was an administrator in New York and Boston. I cannot tell you the amount of equipment we threw away. Not threw away, it would just sit there. And it was like this reminder of the billions of dollars that the US has invested in technology with zero outcomes for Title I kids and rural kids. So I just could not thank you for that comment. I think that that's very important. And the more that we have companies like ours, I'm a teacher. And I'm one of the few ed tech companies where the founder is a teacher. And so every decision made at Prism is through the prism of a math director and a teacher. And we work for you, and partnering with you is everything. So thank you for that feedback.
Any other thoughts?
I think it's a great comment. Does deserve a round of applause. So I fully agree. I think it's bigger than just education. I think often we get, certainly MIT does, romantic about technology. It can solve all our problems. It can be a magic widget. It'll fix everything. We often lose sight of the cultural investment that's necessary to make these things successful. And that's often an afterthought or an oversight, or even worse. And as our world's becoming increasingly digital, whether it's in the classroom or in the workplace or anywhere else in your life, these things are changing faster and faster. And I see this all the time. We have tremendous investments in technology, even at MIT, in our systems and tools. And they often fail because we didn't keep track of the cultural investment necessary so people could take advantage of these capabilities, so they could use them, so they can maximize them. That can't be an afterthought. That has to be a part of what we do. And I mean that as a society. It can't just be in education. It has to be in business. It has to be in every aspect of our lives. The world's changing faster than we can even handle it. We need to make sure that we're investing in our people and our culture so they can navigate this. And it's bigger than just teaching. It's a global phenomenon right now, and we all have to keep sight of it.
Yeah, and I can say I think it's a great question. There is a need to ensure that the education system understands how to use these tools, and there is an available tool for developers to make sure there are enough materials, there are enough resources that they can build the right tools and applications for the education system. On our side from Meta, we had this education grant that we had like last year, or probably a couple of years ago. We had a $150 million grant. We partnered with a bunch of universities to start with, but that was because it was a mode of pilot project in the beginning to understand, and that grant was not just for giving away some of the VR hardware. It was more towards giving end-to-end support to get the entire system running from ground up. And that, I believe, is just the beginning. This is the time when VR wasn't even scalable like 2 years ago to what it is today. I mean, with every year, if you look at the rise of VR and AR and immersive experiences, it's an exponential growth. So with every coming year, Meta as a company has been dedicating a lot of resources and funds to make sure the education system gets the best out of it.
Thank you. Yes, next question, please.
Hi there. Okay. last time I walked up to one of these, it got really loud. This has been really fascinating. I don't know much about education as just industry in general, but really sparking a lot of creativity just with the discussion here. And I'm curious, beyond traditional education, things like apprenticeships or, just college isn't for everybody, right? And so do we see opportunities? Is anybody looking at expanding some of this technology into areas that are underserved? College is becoming less and less affordable and becoming less and less of a mechanism to kind of, pull yourself, maybe from lower class to a middle class. So I'm just curious if there's any work happening there, if it's on anybody's radar, or even with things that we haven't focused on. A lot of young people are getting financial advice from TikTok, or practical skills like DIY and home improvement, and a lot of skills that are dying in a lot of ways. Do we see any opportunity there with some of this new technology?
Great question. Thoughts on this one?
I can.
I think we all have something to say. But just my quick response is 100%. So CTE, as you know, is a really, lots of states have CTE programs focused on the industries in their local community and how to connect both K-12 industry and community college and higher ed. And so we're working with Columbus, Ohio. We're working with many CTE programs, looking at their pathways and really kind of building experiences aligned to their community. So we work in West Virginia, we work in Ohio. These are all very different states across the U.S. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all. In the way that Algebra 1 is evergreen, it's what it was in the 1800s. It's the same. You can learn algebra in India, in Europe, it's the US. It's largely the same subject matter. But career pathways are very different based on the community. So we're in the southern part of West Virginia, where there were a lot of coal mining communities that were affected. So we've built tons of modules for them on renewables. The state is investing a lot in different forms of energy. So it's definitely a very big area of research, and VR has a lot to do to democratize access to high-quality training for that.
Arpit?
Yeah, I can tell you I have been in discussions with, for example, I was in discussion with the ASU. It's one of the biggest university in the country. And one of the things that they were piloting, for example, is how to utilize the tools that we are building and help remote students so they don't have to come on campus. Today, on-campus cost, as Mark mentioned, it's like rising at a rate that's becoming unaffordable. But what if they start building these tools and the courses with the professors being there in an immersive environment where all these students, no matter where they are in the country, they can attend the lecture at the same time if they have the right tools and the courses. And for that, we're not just building this hardware, but also some of the applications, like, for example, Workroom, where you can actually have students all sitting next to each other in a chair in an embodiment avatar form. You can listen to each other with the professor sitting in front of you. These are some of the avenues we are looking at to see how do we make it more affordable to the overall community across the board.
Excellent. Thank you.
We've been looking at degree programs fundamentally, right? There's a traditional, bachelor's degrees, science degrees, all these things. MIT's put a lot of effort through its online programs to trying to look at breaking those down into smaller modules, micro degrees, micro credentialing, really allowing people to focus on particular elements of the curricula that might be interesting or relevant to careers they want to pursue, things they want to learn, but really moving away from these broad education programs, of traditional education, more towards targeted education and credentialing, for folks. And that's not something I think that's going to happen overnight, but there's a lot of time and investment, looking at how do we pivot towards a strategy that supports that kind of learning going forward.
Oh, great. Thank you. Next question.
Hi, Erin. Thanks for yet another great panel. I'm with the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. What role do you see athletics and activities playing in K-12 technology advancement?
My gosh, I haven't thought of that one.
Great question.
Good question.
Have you thought of that?
Good question.
Not really.
Ooh, you stumped the panel. I love it.
Oh.
Challenge accepted. I think we need to go. Yeah.
I will say, let me give my stream of consciousness here, right? When I first started building this, I saw my formula kids hijacking conversations. And my creatives, my athletes, I knew they had a better way to solve it than the formula kid that was a playbook. And the modern math classroom has shut out all people that just think differently, right? So I think that it's interesting to see the kind of support we've gotten from the head of music in a school district, the head of athletics, because they began to see themselves as like the way that they approach their craft, an approach like that is now becoming more universal across subject matter. And so I think that I would love to think about this more with you, but coming up with a more universal pedagogy across like everything that we do, learning experientially, whether it's a playbook for football or whether it's a mathematical model, like really coming up with a way that we learn with our bodies across the spectrum, and that's what comes to mind. But I'm going to think more on that.
Great question. Oh, yes, please.
Hello, my name is Gurpreet Kaur, and I'm an MBA candidate from UW Bothell. So my question is for Prism. Is Prism doing something beyond K-12 up to the graduate level? Because there are students who are not good in math, but definitely they are good in other courses. So just your opinion on that.
100%. So we started with K-12 because that's my love, that's my heart. We got to get our kids first. We are going to be expanding into higher ed. A lot of community colleges and four-year universities have reached out for remedial algebra. You may know this, but remedial algebra is one of the leading causes of dropout rates, especially for associate degrees. So really helping kind of bridge that gap. A lot of our kids say, this is a whole new memory of math. I didn't even realize I was doing math, right? So just building a new perception of what it is to learn the subject matter. After we go into higher ed, we are kind of going back to this idea of our cross-platform solution. Once you've learned something, how do you go back home and use a mixed reality environment where you can collaborate and continue to solve a lot of hard computation and things that are text heavy? It's still going to be better with in a mixed reality environment, not in VR. So as we build out that whole spatialized computing environment for how do you then go and solve complex problem sets, my inspiration, so I went to MIT as well, and my inspiration was those complex problem sets of, I was always feeling like I was still limited by the board. So that multiplayer collaborative space is going to be far-reaching beyond the K-12 space, and that's why I need to talk to Arpit and you, because clearly I'm behind the ball on that.
Okay, thank you so much.
And the last thing I'll tell you is we're also building the humanities. So language arts and social science in beta will come out next fall.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Hey, y'all. My name is Henry, and thank you all for this discussion. And Anurupa, I loved your mention of smart boards.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call out smart boards.
They're 4:3 aspect ratio things that somehow seem futuristic at the time. But my question for now is, I love hearing how exciting it is that education is evolving beyond pencil and paper. And my first thought was, is there ways that you're seeing that examinations, testing of students?
It's a great question.
Are those also evolving?
Yes. So no, they're not. But what you bring up is so important is that no matter if you can change instructional methods, but if you don't change assessment, teachers are going to default to the way things have been done. So as soon as I have a big lobby on how do we make assessments in the same way. If you look at Smarter Balance and Park, they did a lot of work to do drag and drops and matching and kind of move away from multiple choice. That was one great first move. I think what VR assessment is going to allow for is practical, what we now do, and that's a bit unscalable. And so that is the next step to really bridge and allow that change management operation to occur, because if you don't invest in curriculum and assessment, curriculum's going to fall behind.
Are you guys seeing that at the university level as well, from an assessment perspective?
Yeah, for example, with the new technology like generative AI coming on, permeating all of our society. Essentially, at the grad level, what I'm saying with my students is that this is a great tool to help them achieve more rapid prototyping of their project work. But then as a form of assessment, then I do require video submissions of each student then explaining how their code works to ensure that, okay, I maybe use this tool to help me get it done, but I still understand the underlying software design and systems integration of the overall product.
Yeah, I think personally, I feel sometimes technology becomes a leading indicator of what to come. So I think the system is going to catch up eventually to see how we navigate and use this technology for the better processes and including examinations. If I had to make a similar comparison, back in the days when calculators came out, the professors were freaking out. I mean, this was probably before my time, but I heard like, oh, this is going to break the, how is it possible you cannot take calculators? And now become a norm. People figured out how to take examinations around it. So I think we are in that early stage of adaptation of this technology. And as it evolves and becomes scalable, you'll see a much better process around examination, making use of this technology as well.
That's a good point. Thank you. Next question.
Hi, my name is Sophia, and I'm an educator at one of the local community colleges. So one of the pieces that really helps our students to stay engaged and graduate and persist is a sense of belonging. And it is this sense of belonging that got lost during the pandemic and continues to be one of the leading reasons our students are not graduating, especially at a community college level. So I'm wondering, what do you see the technology and how that can help bridge this gap for our students?
Excellent question. Mark, you want to take that? No?
I think there's some things that human interaction is still a unique form and it's still important. And I don't know if technology will ever fully replace that. I think one thing we've seen is maybe we're looking in new ways to find, opportunities for people to expand their horizon, to have new experiences, to do different things. One of the things we hear the most from students is, I want an education, but I need purpose. And that's something we hear all the time from the generation of students today. And giving them opportunities through technology to allow them to go out and solve real problems, through experiential learning opportunities or other things like that, it's been great. Technology allows them to keep some level of connectivity, to the classroom or to their curriculum and their coursework. But I think to your point, we really felt during the pandemic that sense of community, that sense of belonging is a real important part of, folks' social development. And I think it'll continue to be. I think we just have to, I don't think technology is necessarily a replacement for it. I think it can make it more efficient and allow folks to do other things beyond that. But I think it's still going to be an important form and will continue to be.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts. One is that's why I've prioritized a co-location model. So the way that the program works is, you have your classroom, you have 30 to 35 kids in there, and they're co-located, so they're talking to each other the whole time. They just happen to have all their tools in their hands, and a lot of I'll never forget, I was observing an alternative high school, and a child, she yelled out in the middle. She goes, "This is so much better than Chromebooks." And I was like, I did not pay her to say that. Why did she say that at that point? And I walked over to her at the end, and she said three things. She said, one, I couldn't change tabs. The second thing she said was, I couldn't look at my phone. For the person who said the phone, I think that most districts are going to start banning the smartphone in the classroom, and I'm fully supportive of that. And three, I was psychologically safe in there. So I'm not usually good at this subject matter, and I get very anxious, and I could just keep going because nobody was pouring over me. And what that kind of helped me realize is they were all in the same classroom. They were there. And headsets, when they came down, the teacher could facilitate a conversation. They could do that together, but they also had the space to go away. And for the people that need that space to sense make, they had that safe space as well.
Okay. Thank you. All right, I think we have time for one more question, please.
Hi, my name is Alex, and I'm a high school teacher. And in my opinion, one of the primary functions of the school system is to help students figure out what their passions are and their career goals and things like this. And I'm finding that there isn't a lot of good solutions for this out there. And the students really want that. I mean, what's the point of learning all this stuff? It's in my opinion, taking a skill saw and showing someone how to use a skill saw, and then when they ask, well, what do I use this for? You go, oh, we'll figure it out. Just go ahead and figure it out. So what, do any of you see any paths for career exploration, things like that you're, around or in or whatever?
That's exactly how Prism is built. So you step into the role of an epidemiologist on a task force. You step into the role of your building into tissue regeneration therapy for burn victims in California. You're stepping into different vocations, and by the way, you're learning some math and science. But like that's a byproduct of the process. The actual thing that you're learning is how do you identify a problem through a prism of someone in the world, and really kind of build identities, which is why we start as young as possible. Hopefully, Meta's going to kick the age down. Nudge, nudge. But the headsets are 12 and up right now. And so I started with my seventh graders. And from seventh grade, they start learning like all these real world jobs out there and how you can use ratios and fractions and all these things that feel banal to solve these problems. And I think that as the headsets we conserve, they become ergonomically more appropriate for younger children. There's no age young enough to start building identity in the mathematical sciences in particular.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have been partnering with several ISVs today, which are basically the software vendors who are building certain applications that are catered towards some of these educational institutes. I mean, let me ask you this question. Like, when you were growing up, how many of you struggled with like planets and physics, planets or maybe history or something, right? Just mugging up those dates or understanding the galaxy. I was one of them, I can tell you honestly. Like, I cannot read that paper and memorize how it looked and be creative about it. But if you look at some of those applications being developed, where today, back in the days when you were asked like, what do you want to become when you grow up, right? You want to become astrophysics. They had no idea what to do besides just reading something in the paper, right? But if you look at like one of the demos we have today, now you can actually enter in that galaxy, understand how the planets work, see how that works, and then they are given an opportunity to see, okay, is this something really that interests me? Is this the space where I want to grow and make a career into? And similar to that, we have several others, like for example, if you're a history student, we have places where if you're talking about Rome, it creates an entire environment of Colosseum in Rome where you're inside that trying to learn the pillars and the buildings and the art around it. Is that something really interests you? So you are actually within that space, and there are a lot of those ISVs that are coming up who are going to create more use cases that we are partnering with. So I think there is more to come in that space.
Nice. Great question. Yeah, virtual immersive internships, right? I love it. I think that's really cool. I guess, I was going to say,
we did one project like last cycle with T-Mobile on the topic of pop-up art museums. And so this is a way that students could then go into an art museum or a virtual one through AR. And whenever you go to a museum, they have the cords, saying don't go too close to a piece of artwork, right? And certainly don't touch like a sculpture, for example. But here in the AR world, you can actually go there, look at different perspectives. You can have a classroom of students all be looking at from different angles what the underside of a sculpture is, for example, that you can't necessarily see otherwise. And so it kind of opens up new ways of experiencing art and also brings that artwork to locations where you may not be able to travel to, the MoMA, for example, or other museums. And so it lowers the barrier of like entry or accessibility in that way.
Great. Thank you, John. Thank you again. All right. Well, I think that's a wrap for us. Let's go ahead and give our panelists a round of applause and our audience for some excellent questions and engagement. And of course, I get to give a plug for our next speaker series on September 12th. The topic is logistics and supply chain. So please go to our website and register. And for those here, we can continue with the network happy hour. And if you haven't had a chance to please check out the demos. So thank you again and have a great evening.